Welcome back to the Sabbatarianism podcast. I'm Justin Hoos, and I have with me Mr. Neal Saul. Hello, Neal.
Hello.
So I'm going to disband the whole thing of announcing what podcast number this is for a couple of reasons. I just don't like following what other people do. That's what everyone does, so therefore I'm not going to do that. But it's just unnecessary. Anyone listening to it can see it right there in front of them, what number it is, and it's just not a big deal. And you and I are going to kind of do some things. We're going to record some things. We're not exactly sure how that's going to fit in with what we're doing with Richard also. Or
whether it'll be one episode or two or more.
Or whether it's going to make the cut or not. All right, so today, Neal and I are going to embark on an adventure here in the Bible. We want to explain what we're going to do here?
Well, I think it's important to have an understanding of what the people who wrote these books, not Moses I'm talking, but David when he wrote the Psalms, or Isaiah, Jeremiah, what their mindset was, what they thought of God when they described him, and so on. And
just kind of their worldview, how they view the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in looking at that, a couple of things. Number one, most of our Bibles today are derived from what they call the Masoretic text. And
so the King James and all the other,
almost
or
all,
not all the others, but a lot of the others that are based on the King James,
and that includes Strong's Concordance, and
okay.
and most of the literature from days of yore, we'll say.
Okay. Well, let me explain to our listeners here what the Masoretic text is.
All right.
At least what Wikipedia has to say about it. And Wikipedia, I don't know. But
I could have found a better source.
Well, maybe, but it's good enough. I read through it a little bit here. So the Masoretic text, and it goes on to describe all the different names of it and stuff, is an authoritative Hebrew and Aramaic text of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. The Masoretic text defines the Jewish canon and its precise letter text and its vocalization and accentuation, known as the Masorah. Now, this is the main point, right? Is that the Masoretic text was developed through Rabbinic Judaism, correct?
Yeah, and what research I did on it showed that the original Hebrew language over several hundred years had been basically lost or forgotten. People couldn't read it, and they couldn't speak it. And so these rabbis, and this wasn't until the 7th century, and it took them 300 years to get through the process, made an attempt to what they call Paleo-Hebrew, the New Hebrew.
What the Old Testament was written in.
No, the Old Testament was the original Hebrew. And this was the New Hebrew. And subsequently...
I'm trying to define what you mean by the Paleo-Hebrew.
Well, maybe I got the wrong terminology.
No, that's all right. Let's just try and kind of...
you might see if you can look that up. I don't know, but
all right.
I thought that was the newer.
Oh, is it?
I thought
let's
so.
Look it up.
I'll continue while you do that. What they found out since the 1920s, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, because so many of those scrolls were written about 300 BC, is that there's a lot of differences. And these differences make major changes in some of the scripture.
So just to be kind of define what we're talking about here and clear, is that they'd lost the language. And then as they were trying to redevelop it, there became kind of two different lines of how to pronounce things and how to place the little jots and tittles, the things above the lettering.
That indicated vowels, basically.
Right. And there's two lines of that, right? There's the Ben Asher and then another one. I don't remember what it's called. Am I correct in thinking that the Masoretic text, they found out that it went one way, whereas the writers of the King James and others went a different way?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think again, my research showed that by the 2nd century, the rabbinic Judaism was in the process of changing what the ancients believed in their mind, and it has to do with more than one God. Yet the Scripture's full of references to more than one God. Just as an example, this week we're going to be in our local Bible study. We're going to be in Exodus 20. Which is the giving of the first time the law was given at Mount Sinai.
The 10 Commandments.
And God says what? Have no other gods before me. Why would he make a statement like that if there were no other gods that you could put before him?
Yeah.
And I've heard people say, well, that can be money or drugs or sex.
That's idols.
Yeah, those are idols. They're not gods.
Yeah.
There are other gods.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here, though.
We are. Only a little bit.
Yeah. So I did look up Paleo Hebrew, and it says here, at least again with Wikipedia, that Paleo Hebrew is to be the script used to record the original texts of the Hebrew Bible due to its similarity to the Samaritan script. So Paleo Hebrew, I believe, is the Old Testament Hebrew. Yeah.
Yeah. Although
it's the one that is gone. Yet they've got this kind of new Hebrew that's really Yiddish and other things, and that's not really Hebrew. It's not the Hebrew of the Bible. And as you said, that was lost.
Right.
And it took them 300 years to try and bring this back. And then I think what you're saying is then the Masoretic text was developed from there after.
It was that text that was translated into Latin. Actually, Latin may have been done before, but into other languages, but was used extensively or to a large degree by most of the. Those who
the translators who developed these books.
Right.
So like the King James, the translators that worked on that work used the Masoretic text as kind of their Rosetta Stone to make these translations.
When they were translating the Hebrew, that was the text that they were using to translate. And like I say, there were differences, at least based on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the most recent, the oldest complete Masoretic text we have is from the 11th century, or 1100s, I forget. So now you take that versus some of the scrolls that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that they estimate were 300 BC, much closer to the source.
Yeah.
So, and that was basically the basis for this study and where we're going to go with this.
Okay. So with that said, we are going to use the English Standard Version. Neal bought himself a new Bible after I made fun of him.
I'm going to get another one, too.
Are you? All right. And I use eSword, so I've got all kinds of translations. But we're going to use the English Standard Version, the ESV, because
it uses as much as possible
the Dead Sea Scrolls form.
Dead Sea Scrolls, correct.
Okay. So where are we going next here? What do we want to look at?
Well, the first thing I want to look at is actually this whole episode will be about God's divine counsel.
Okay. That's what we'll name it. How about that?
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll start in Psalms 82.
All right.
And it's only 8 verses, so I'm going to just read the whole thing. It says, a psalm of Asaph. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, this is Yahweh saying, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die, and fall like any other prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. Now, in verse 1, God, singular, but that's Elohim. And the reason it's singular is because there's no, I forget the terminology. When you put like the, if it had the God, it would be, it could be plural. But it doesn't have that. Just like in Genesis 1. Elohim is a plural word.
Yeah.
But
El is the singular, where
right.
Elohim is plural.
Plural. But Elohim is also used in Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
So in the beginning, Elohim created
right.
the heavens and the earth.
But the second context there, in the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. That has to be plural.
And that's why ESV has made it plural here.
In many versions.
And it is also Elohim, right?
Right. That's also Elohim. And many versions will have plural there. But you can't be in the midst of one.
Sure.
So it has to be plural.
Let's back up here for just a second. I think it's good that we also kind of fess up here that a lot of what we're doing here is based on the work of Dr. Michael Heiser.
True.
We both read his book, The Unseen Realm. We've both listened to a lot of his podcasts. We find the work interesting. However, some of his work is not in line with our beliefs, and but that's okay. You know, for some reason in the modern world, we feel like we need to agree with everybody on something, or they can't be our friend, or we can't listen to a single thing they say, right? Which is just nonsense.
Yeah, true.
I've never met any man that I agree with 100%, you know, and if I did, I'd be really scared. Let's look, though, at how some of the other translations translate verse 1. You read it there from the ESV. And it says, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Let's go ahead and just go with the King James. God standeth in the congregation of the mighty and judgeth among the gods. So it does have the plural. And
it says in the first half of that again, read that.
God standeth in the congregation.
In the congregation
of the mighty.
Of the mighty. Now, because of that and other translations that are similar, they think that is men because of the word mighty. And I've seen in some cases, I think my New American Standard uses in the assembly,
okay,
or in the heavenly assembly, or something like that. But in this version uses the term in the divine council. And what is pointing out basically is that God is sitting there with this group of beings. In this case, people will want to say, well, they're angelic beings. No, they're heavenly beings. There's a difference. There's a variety of heavenly beings. They're spirits. And we'll get to that in
They're
just
not
a
of
minute.
this world.
Right.
Let me real quick, though, the NLT, which is... It's such
New
a New Living. It's so great for some things, and it's absolutely terrible in others. This one I think is pretty good. So, God presides over heaven's court. He pronounces judgment on the heavenly beings.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding here of verse 1 at least.
So he goes on and he's chastising them. How long will you judge unjustly? And do all these things, and not sure I want to break into that section of it yet. We'll get to it later.
Okay.
Where that comes from or why that is, I'll put it that way. We'll go down to verse 6. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die. Well, if they were men, that would be...
That sentence makes no sense.
Makes no sense, exactly. Yeah. And, this is something when I first started this topic, many years ago, that I always believed that the angelic world, even though they were created beings, they were spirit beings, they couldn't die. That's why Satan would be cast into outer darkness. But right there, and if God created them, he can take them out.
Well, they aren't subject to like death by age or anything like that. They're immortal as far as not dying from natural causes, we'll say.
Right.
But if God wants something gone,
it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah, we could come up with a few verses about that.
Sure.
All right, let's go over a few pages to Psalm 89.
Or a click of the mouse, one or the other.
And I'll read verses 5 and 7. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like Yahweh? Okay, it says Lord, but I use Yahweh. Verse 6 is most important there. Who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? That can't be a human. That has to be, and he's in the assembly of the holy ones, in the divine council. So this is just one of the proofs that so many of the texts from Psalms 82 that try to make those either sons of Israel or Jews or men in general is an error.
I don't know. Let me read from the King James. So verse 6 here from the King James. For who in the heaven can be compared unto the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty can be likened unto the Lord?
Okay. Again, that's to me, it's a bit of a corruption of the original, which is fine, but it loses some of the meaning that is intended. Because if it could really mean exactly what you read, but if it depends, our mindset twists it because it doesn't make that.
Yeah, and let's define that. I think what you're saying here is that monotheism, that term, monotheism, there is only one God, and that's such trouble for a lot of people of, okay, well then Jesus can't be God because there's only the Father, there's only one God, and it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And
it did for the Jews of Jesus' day. We'll
right?
see that when we progress here.
Well, when was the word or the term monotheism even created? It was well after Jesus, right?
1700s.
1700s. Yeah. That was only a couple of hundred years ago.
That was the first time it was coined as in a term. As a term.
So before that, it was the common belief. I guess that's what we're saying here. Is the common belief was there were actually many gods. There's none like the Father. There's none like the Son. They are both way above these other gods, other Elohim, and they stand alone by themselves, and they are the Most High, the of greatest authority.
Well, we'll look at some examples of that.
But down through time, what you're saying here is we've come to this one God thing, and that has wreaked a lot of havoc on our modern belief system.
Yes, and it really came from Rabbinic Judaism.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So many of the people over time would always seek out the Jews for their answers to their Christian biblical questions.
Imagine that. Wow.
Let's go to...
Before we do that, can I read the NLT? Because it really trashes us.
Okay.
For who in all heaven can compare with the Lord? All right, that's good. What mightiest angel is anything like the Lord?
Yeah.
That word angel is not what's being used here.
No.
That's a bad translation.
Yeah. And especially when you know that angel just means messenger. Somebody that God sent. And we'll look at one of those right now.
Okay.
Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 22. And in verse 19, see if I want to start before that. This is the point in time where really God has decreed that Ahab has to go.
Yep. And he's standing there on the hill with Jehoshaphat. Right.
And the prophet Micaiah, yeah.
This is hilarious.
Yeah, it's a great story. We won't read the whole thing. Probably should start at 13, but we'll start at let's see. Maybe we will read the whole thing.
What do we got to do?
Let's start at 17. And he said, let's see, I got to see who he is. You know what? Let's start at 13. The messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to him, "Behold, the words of the prophet with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them and speak favorably." But
I think we got to set this up more, Neal. So Jehoshaphat and Ahab are looking at trying to go and take on or fight with another place, another people, and all the prophets of Ahab are saying, "Yeah, go do it." And Ahab's asking Jehoshaphat, "Hey, will you join me in this?" And Jehoshaphat says, "Well, what's God say about that?"
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, my prophets say it's going to be great." And Jehoshaphat rightly said, "Well, is there anyone of the Lord that can back that up?" And then they send for this guy Micaiah or Micaiah or whatever, these names. But they send for this guy, and the hilarious part is Ahab says, "I hate that guy. He never prophesies anything good for me." And so they're going to get him right now in 13, and that's where you're picking up here.
Okay, yeah, I'll start at 15 now. And when he had come to the king said to him, Micaiah, we'll try to use that from now on, "Shall we go up to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain?" And he answered and said, "Go up and triumph. The Lord will give it to you into the hands of the king."
Sarcasm.
But the king said to him, "How many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?" And he said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, "These have no master. Let each return to his home in peace." And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good?"
I hate this guy.
Me, but evil. And Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the words of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him, on the right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, "I will entice him." And the Lord said to him, "By what means?" And he says, "I will go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And he said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets. The Lord has declared disaster for you."
This is not only an interesting one, or not only a funny one, for the reason that I mentioned earlier, but it's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's kind of recap here.
Well, and one of the points I want to bring out about this is that, God doesn't need a council to do his work. But then he doesn't need us to do his work on earth either.
He doesn't need anyone to do anything.
No. So, but he chooses to use his creation in not only in what he does, but in his decision making. Now he has final approval. If this spirit that recommended this, if he knew it wasn't going to work, he wouldn't have let him do it.
Right.
But and subsequently, he gets to go down and be a lion spirit, and then.
And that's an explanation for what's happening to Ahab that I mentioned here, where all of his prophets are saying, yes, go up. You're going to win. Yeah. You're going to take this land, Ramoth Gilead. So it's an explanation of that and how that all worked. It's kind of like going back in time here for a second. I mean, when he says, when the heavenly council, or what does it say, the hosts of heaven?
Host of heaven in this version.
Yeah. They're gathered, and God says, yep, go down and be a lying spirit. Well, that's kind of a recounting of what we read earlier of these prophets, like I said. So it's interesting how that all works, and it does outline that God has this counsel, this divine counsel that helps him even though he doesn't need help.
Yeah.
Gives him advice even though he doesn't need advice. He chooses this for his own purposes, and he's God. So really interesting story.
We'll look at another one in Daniel.
Okay.
Daniel 4.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. This is a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had where he learns that he's going to be
turned into a beast.
A beast, right?
Yeah.
Me starting in verse 13. I saw in a vision, this is Nebuchadnezzar, in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip it of its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beast flee up from under it and the birds from the branches, but leave the stump of its root in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 time periods pass over him. The sentence is by decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This dream King Nebuchadnezzar saw, and you, O Belshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me its interpretation. But you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. And I'll drop down to verse 24.
Daniel answers him.
Daniel answers him. And in verse 24, he says, this is the interpretation, O king. It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my Lord the king. Okay, in the dream, he saw the watcher, a heavenly host, a heavenly being that was making this pronouncement. But Daniel tells him it's the decree of the Most High. So, it was a council. They decided this is what they were going to do. God approved it. It happened, and
this is in part speculation on your part here, based on what we just read with Ahab and Jehoshaphat and Micaiah and that whole thing. You're kind of bringing that methodology into this story. Is that?
Well, you could say safe? That. What I guess the point is that. This holy one, the watcher, and he says in verse 17, the sentence is by decree of the watchers. Okay, the watchers are the ones that said, here's what we're going to do. God had to approve it.
Is that word watchers the same as what's used for heavenly host, or is this yet a different one? Should we look that up?
Yeah, look, what's verse 17 say in some of the other versions?
Okay.
But it's a decision by the word of the holy ones, so that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdoms of the men.
Almost all of them are using watchers.
Watchers.
It also, here's the NLT. Decreed by the messengers.
Yeah.
He wants to associate everything with angels.
With an angel, yeah.
But almost every other one. NIV uses messengers.
Do you have the NET there?
I do.
What's it say?
Decree of the centennials. Well, let's look at the actual word. That's going to be Strong's 5894. EER. from the root corresponding to another, a watcher, that is an angel, as a guardian, a watcher.
Yeah, I could understand why Strong might have made that conclusion.
But yet, as you said, Strong is also using the Masoretic text for a lot of its stuff.
Yeah, right.
Now, we're not... I want to be really careful here, because it's going to... We could drift off, and others might accuse us of this, of saying that anything that we disagree with, well, the Bible's been altered and it's wrong. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying certain words are skewed in a direction that fits the Rabbinic Judaism point of view, but not that the Bible has been somehow corrupted when it doesn't fit our narrative, right? Because I think a lot of people do that, and I don't like it.
No, I agree. Something that, we've talked about this before in our Bible studies and what have you. There's no doubt that there have been many changes in the original text.
In the translation?
No, even in some of the original text.
Based on what was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
No, well, not necessarily based on that, but based on some of the books of Rabbinic Judaism, where they kept track of every time they made a change.
Really?
Yeah, it's all it's available, and Richard's talked about that more than once. That they were so meticulous in keeping it right that when they made a change, they wrote it down and
they had
a record of it.
Apostolic authority. Why wouldn't they?
Sure. But you know what? I was supposed to go to.
Well, but my point is that the Bible has everything we need
for salvation.
For salvation. We're talking about very small details here. We're talking about translational issues mostly.
Well, like I said,
we're not saying the Bible is corrupted. I want to be really, really clear about that.
I agree. But as I mentioned at the beginning, if we can kind of understand the mindset of those people, from Abraham to Christ, we'll say, how they thought, and what was in their minds as they walked on the earth, then we have a little better understanding as we read some of this stuff, even if the translations are different.
Yeah, and that's another thing, is the translations can be very, very different. I mean, look at the NLT. That's one that's very different from everything
exactly.
else.
Even Young's literal translation, which is a pretty good one, but he takes a lot of liberty, in my opinion.
Does he?
Yeah, I thought so.
So the word literal is kind of a...
No, I just read from Daniel 7. What I really wanted to go, or 4. I wanted to go to Daniel 7 first, and verse 9. And I'm not sure the exact context of this.
It's first part of 7. It's Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts.
Okay, so we're basically it's end time prophecy.
But then it goes into this. This is afterward, right after the 4 beasts are described.
Right. And then in verse 9 says, "As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and his hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened." Okay, so this is obviously in God's throne with all these spiritual beings around him, and they're going to hold a council.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot there. A lot of people, or a lot of, I shouldn't say people, beings.
Beings, yeah.
That are there for this basically court judgment.
Yeah, I would say. And, you have to read through the rest of the chapter to see exactly where he's going with it. But, the point for this discussion is that this is another council meeting. And, I'm not even going to go there, but you can see the same thing in Job, I think 1 and 2, where, God's sitting on his throne and the sons of God.
Well, they're gathered.
The sons
they're
of God
gathered
are
together.
gathered. And who shows up but darn Satan?
Yeah.
And he was not part of the council. He was cast out.
Well, it's almost, man, the more and more I get through all this, it's almost like this whole thing in the spirit world that we're shown, the parts of the spirit world that we're shown, is all a courtroom.
Yeah. It's all judgment.
It's all a courtroom.
Yeah.
Even Satan is the accuser.
Yeah.
He is the one accusing.
The prosecutor.
Right? And the Messiah is what? He is our mediator. He is like our public defense attorney.
There you go.
It's all a courtroom.
Now, the problem that most, let's say, today's Christian world has, whether you're Sabbatarian or not, is that this appears like polytheism.
Multiple gods. And where you have a god of thunder and a god of fertility and a goddess of this.
But all those gods did exist in one form or another. We'll look at a few examples of that in a minute. But is it polytheism? No, not really. And the reason English readers presume that it is because when we see the letters G-O-D, we assume that those letters carry with them a unique divine attribute. It applies only to, God the Father, basically.
Well, but in modern times, we do say small g.
Well, true, and we hesitate.
For the others.
We hesitate to put an S in those letters, gods, but biblical writers did not have that view.
Well, and I think it's always thought of as like something in people's heads, not that there are actual other small g gods that exist in the heavenly realm.
Well, and the real problem is G-O-D or G_D, as some people want to write it, or even Yahweh or gods are not unique attributes. They're really a designation of a domain. Okay.
Even Yahweh, Jehovah, that is a domain?
Well, it's unique to him. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Elohim is used over 1,000 times in the Old Testament to speak of Yahweh. Okay. It's also used in Psalms 82, we read, of the gods.
Speaking of these people.
Members of the heavenly council, we'll say.
Divine council, heavenly council.
Right. There are gods of foreign nations. Let's go to 1 Kings 11. And let's go to verse 33. It says, maybe I need to back up a little bit. It'll be all right. Because they have forsaken me, talking about Israel, this is God speaking, and worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, Milcom, the god of the Amorites, and they have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and kept my statutes and my rules, as David, his father, did. This is where Solomon is being, his kingdom is going to be rent into, and who is it, Jeroboam, who's going to get 10, and
his son
Rehoboam gets the others.
Yeah.
So and he's given it. Here's this is the reason that he's going to do this. Who's the prophet there? I forget. Ahiah took his garment and tore it in 12 pieces. This talking to Jeroboam. This is in verse 30, 31. And he said to Jeroboam, "Take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. Behold, I'm about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon." So we get the context there. But the point is that they refer to all these different beings as gods of...
Small g, God.
God.
Or goddess. And I'm sitting here looking at it, and every single one of them, that is H430 Elohim.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah. And we won't go there, but Deuteronomy 32:17, it uses the word demons. Paul actually quotes some of that when he talks about having forget, it's in 1 Corinthians, I forget the book or the chapter, but not associating with demons, having fellowship with them.
And that's also an Elohim?
And that's
what you're saying?
Well, it's a different word, but it's Shedem, not Elohim.
Okay.
But it's a spiritual being, and that's the point. Is because when I mentioned that this had more to do with domain, that's kind of where we're going with this.
Okay.
We'll look at this is a good one. 1 Samuel 28. I had to read this whole chapter to try to figure out what was going on.
Saul consults the medium at Endor.
Yeah.
You know where that name Endor is also used?
Where?
Return of the Jedi.
I was thinking that's the first thing I heard in my mind, but I wasn't sure that's where
Star Wars is filled with names out of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
The whole series.
Yeah. I got verse 13 down here. I guess that's where I want to go. It says, the king said to her, okay, this the witch had just brought up, we'll back up to verse 11. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me. When the women saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. Okay, he had disguised himself.
Right, and this is a medium who can supposedly consult with spirits.
Right. And the king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see God coming out of the earth. What does your version say there?
Well, I'm reading with you in the ESV. I can look some up for you, though.
At the end of 13.
King James, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. Let's go to our friend, the NLT. I see a God coming up out of the earth.
Okay, good.
So it looks like they're all using that.
Okay, and he said to her, what is his appearance? And she said, an old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and bowed his face to the ground and paid homage. Okay, here in this little section, they're calling Samuel a god, equating it to a god.
Equating, right. Well, and I don't know that they're actually talking to Samuel himself here. I don't know. I don't think any of us know.
This is the point. Disembodied humans. Okay, we die. Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes, the spirit in man returns to God who gave it.
And it goes under the altar.
And it's there, right.
Right.
Now, where, the location is in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The location of the foreign gods are in the spiritual realm. The location of Yahweh, Elohim, is in the spiritual realm.
Right.
All their domain is in the spiritual realm.
Right. All I'm saying, Neal, is that this could be, as in the case of Ahab and Jehoshaphat, another spirit could have said, I'll go and fool this lady and act like Samuel.
That's a possibility.
Right.
And it wouldn't even surprise me if that was the case.
Right. Me neither.
Because, I don't know.
Right.
As far as can her dead body come back?
Right.
But if God can let a spirit come down and do his work, why couldn't he just let Samuel do it?
He could. I saw gods ascending out of the earth. That God, small g,
should not be plural.
Is Elohim.
Yeah, but it should not be plural.
I saw an Elohim.
Yeah,
a spirit being, basically, is what's being said here.
Yeah, you could say that.
I saw a spirit being ascending out of the earth.
And so my point is that all these gods have a domain which is not in the physical world, even though that occasionally they can cross over, and one of those is the angel of the Lord. We see that used frequently.
Right.
And it almost always refers to God's presence. He may have sent the angel, but it's like an ambassador.
It's like a representation of him.
Right. It's the same as him if it isn't him. In a lot of cases, it is him. In Genesis, where before Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, the three of them come down, and Abraham sees them.
Right.
Well, one of those is two of them are angels, and they go on ahead, and the other one is called the angel of the Lord originally.
Yeah, I believe it to be the Messiah.
It's one of the Godhead.
Yeah,
and
or the representation of.
This could be another podcast maybe, but in especially Second Temple Judaism, what they call Second Temple, which is between the Testaments basically for the most part, all the writings and what have you. The idea of a dual Godhead was pretty extant. And
you mean a lot of people believe that way?
Yeah. And that's why when John wrote his gospel, he starts out with, in the beginning was God, or in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Because, and there's a distinction between was God and was with God, being God the Father and Jesus the Son.
And the Son.
Yeah. And so that, and at the end of it all, after the resurrection, all those Jewish people that entered the church originally, before, the gospel went to the Gentiles, had no problem worshiping Jesus as a God and Yahweh also.
As the supreme.
As the supreme God.
The only one that Jesus has to answer to.
Yeah.
But doesn't really need to because they're so in line.
So now the second part of this.
Aligned, I should say. All right, where are we going next, Neal?
Well, I'm not sure. A lot of places throughout the Old Testament especially, it says that I am God and there's none besides me, or none like me.
Yeah.
And it seems a little bit contradictory when it says that, there are no gods besides me, but there are all these gods referred to throughout the Old Testament. And let's look at Deuteronomy 4, verse 35 of Deuteronomy 4. To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord is God. There is no others besides him. In verse 39 it says, Know therefore today, lay it to your heart, that the Lord is God, in heaven above and on earth beneath. There is no other. See now, verse 39. This is Deuteronomy 32, verse 39. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God, no Elohim besides me. I kill and make alive, I wound and I heal, and there is none that can deliver out of my hand. And these are not statements of denial.
These aren't disproving
that there are no other gods but him. Okay?
There is none equal to him.
Right. That's
he doesn't have an equal.
Mostly because Scripture would prohibit that conclusion, because it so uses that there are other gods so many places.
So this is what you're really talking about ultimately here is back in the days when the Bible was written, the people that the writers of the Bible were intending to read it, they would have had in their mind already, of course there are other gods. There's all these other gods, but when they read this, what they're reading it as is that God has no equal.
Right.
That's immediately where their mind would have went.
That he is unique.
And that's what you're saying here of how we could potentially benefit from this knowledge that you're espousing or that you're putting forward here, is that we could also benefit from having that same mindset.
Tell you what,
as we read our Bibles.
Exactly. And we should have that mindset. And like I mentioned earlier, we get this image of God as one God, no others.
Well, and there's Unitarianism out there where there is only one, that they deny even the Son.
Yeah.
Which is
and Mormonism
blasphemy.
Does the same thing.
Who does?
Mormonism.
Okay.
He was a created being.
And that he wasn't a part of the heavenly realm, and
wasn't part of the
John
host.
didn't know what he was talking about in his gospel. And,
exactly.
Okay.
I think I want to read this statement. Okay. Let's go to Deuteronomy 32:17 first. And this is interesting.
They sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded.
Okay, read that from the NLT. You got that, New Living?
Yeah. I got them all, Neal.
Yeah.
NLT. They offered sacrifices to demons, which are not God, to gods they had not known before, to new gods only recently arrived, to gods their ancestors had never feared.
Now, the English Standard Version, that first sentence says, they sacrificed to demons that were no gods. But the word is not plural. And it's not Elohim, it's Eloah, which is singular. And so the New Living Translation has it right in this case compared to most other translations.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Good for them.
Yeah.
So the King James says, they sacrificed unto devils, not to God, capital G.
Yeah, and that's incorrect.
Well, Eloah is usually the only thing that's referencing God, right? Yeah, that's right. They sacrificed to demons or devils, not to the God.
Well, I suppose it could be that word, but when it depends on the context. Now,
yeah,
read that again, just that first sentence or to the first comma.
King James.
No. Okay.
They sacrificed unto devils, not to God. Capital G.
Capital G.
And almost all the other translations went capital G there.
Oh, yeah, really?
Except for the complete Jewish Bible.
It says, because when you read, this is how
the ESV didn't either.
No, and it says they sacrificed to demons that were no God, were not God.
Were no gods.
Or they say no gods, plural,
that's a bad translation on ESV part there.
Yeah, it is.
Eloah is not plural.
And it should be, it should be that are not God.
Yeah.
And whether it could be capital G or small g.
Well, he's talking to Israel here. So in the context, he's basically saying they sacrificed unto demons, not the God that brought you out of Egypt.
Exactly.
That deserves to be worshipped and have sacrifices.
So let's see, go down to verse 39 of 32. It says, see now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal. I think I've read that. And there is none that can deliver out of my hand. Yet, we see, and even the second half of 17, to new gods that had come, or to gods they had never known, to new gods. These other versions use plural gods in those instances.
In 17 or 39?
In 17.
Let me get back. So at the end here, plural, 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 plural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all of them
in this, in the same book or the same chapter that it identifies gods, other gods, it says there's none like me. And the point is what we mentioned earlier, that God is unique. He's different than all the other Elohim that's out there.
Well, hang on just a second here. Let's chew on this a bit. They sacrificed to demons that was not God. To gods they had never known. Plural.
Yeah.
These same demons that he's saying they sacrificed to were
these gods.
Elohim.
Yes.
That word there is
right.
Elohim. So this is a pretty good proof text here for what you're laying down, that there is, and this is Moses talking to the children of Israel. Again, this is Deuteronomy. So
now, back in verse 7, or
of 32.
Of 32. Actually, we can. Is it 7? We can go to verse 8. he's recanting a series of events as he goes through. This is known as the Song of Solomon. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. Most versions do not use sons of God there. They'll use sons of Israel. Israel didn't exist at the Tower of Babel.
Well, that's how do we know that this is speaking of the Tower of Babel? Let's prove that out.
Well, we could go back to Genesis 11, but when did he divide? He gave the nation. When did he divided mankind?
He sent everybody in their own direction, scattered them in
at the Tower of Babel.
Correct.
When he confused their languages.
Right.
Now, what he's saying here, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, he disowned them. Not too much different than the prodigal son. Okay, the son wanted his inheritance, and he went off and when God disinherited, he had to put somebody in charge, because originally he was in charge of all the nations. Of course, originally there was only one nation, before the flood and after, until the Tower of Babel. Now all of a sudden you got all these different people that are divided up based on their confused language, and he assigns these not angelic, but heavenly beings to be their guardian, to administer their judgment on them, or that courtroom deal that we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
And,
well, hang on, because I think this is something we need to dig into more.
Okay. So
and we're kind of out of time for this week.
All right.
Why don't we come back next time? And we'll dig back into this, into this part right here of proving that out, because I think that's really important. That's something I've had a bit of a hard time with. I know that Michael Heiser was really well researched, and he backed up his stuff with scripture, and he seemed to be a good man to me. But I want to prove these things out for ourselves.
Well, and one of the things we can plan on as we move forward, well, we can pick it up right here, but and there isn't a whole lot more, just more than the time allows. But now, one of the things that God is doing, and we know this even from New Testament scripture, is he's in the process of restoring the way things were really in Eden. It's a restoration, not only
we're going back to Eden.
We're going back to Eden.
Full circle.
Yeah.
We've left Eden. Our ancestors left Eden, and God is going to bring all of us back to Eden. And
all the nations as they will exist in the future also. And he will be controlling them, not these angelic or heavenly beings. And in the process, the worldview basically is that he's in the process of doing that right now. And he started with Paul going to the Gentiles, because once Israel was, out of the picture of Judah, then it went rapidly to the Gentile world, and is continuing today.
Okay, this is another part where I think we got to prove it out. I know this is a part of Heiser's thought process and all that, but we need to kind of prove it for ourselves, and the listeners can prove it for themselves or disprove it for themselves. But I think it's important that we kind of dig into those types of things. So let's begin doing that next time.
All right.
You good?
Good.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.